She warned them to stay out. They didn't listen, so she made sure they'd never try again. Jasmine Anderson had worked hard for everything she had. At 46 years old, she was proud of her home, a beautiful, two-story house in a quiet suburb with a backyard that was her sanctuary. Mature trees lined the fence, and in the center of it all was her pride and joy, a crystal-clear, perfectly maintained pool. She wasn't the type to brag, but she had every reason to be proud. She bought the house on her own, with no handouts, no shortcuts, just years of grinding, saving, and making smart choices. Her neighborhood was mostly families, a mix of established residents and newer folks. Some were friendly, others kept to themselves. Jasmine didn't mind either way. She wasn't looking to be the community favorite, she just wanted to live in peace. But that peace, it didn't last long. The first time it happened, she brushed it off. One Saturday afternoon, she came home from running errands and noticed wet footprints leading from her backyard gate to the sidewalk. At first, she thought maybe it was the new landscaper or a utility worker, but then she saw it, a dripping wet towel, carelessly thrown over her fence. She checked the pool. The water level was lower, her inflatable lounger was askew, and a half-empty can of generic soda sat on her patio table. Someone had been in her backyard. She took a deep breath, trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe a kid jumped the fence and panicked when they thought they might get caught. But when she asked around, she got nothing but casual shrugs from the neighbors. "Oh, it's probably just one of the kids," a woman down the street said with a dismissive wave. "You know how they are." Another neighbor, a man named Mr. Henderson, who was always tinkering with his vintage car, barely looked up as he said, "They're just having fun. You got a nice pool, Ms. Anderson. People notice." The way he said it, a little too knowingly, bothered her, but she didn't push. She just reinforced the latch on her gate, and hoped it wouldn't happen again. But it did. A week later, she was sitting in her living room, absorbed in a book, when she heard splashing. At first, she thought maybe she left the pool filter on a timer, but then came the distinct sound of laughter. She walked to the back door and peeked outside. There, in her pool, was a teenage boy, probably around 15, casually swimming laps as if he owned the place. A girl, about the same age, perhaps his sister, sat at the edge, dipping her feet in and giggling. Jasmine flung the door open. "Excuse me." The kids jerked up, eyes wide with panic. The boy scrambled out of the water like a startled frog. I thought," he stammered. "We didn't think you'd mind." "You didn't think to ask?" Jasmine snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. "Who even are you?" The girl mumbled something about living 3 houses down before they both bolted out the gate, leaving a trail of wet footprints behind them. Jasmine stood there, a discarded pool noodle in her hand, heart pounding. She wanted to let it go, chalk it up to youthful indiscretion, but then came the excuses. The next day, she approached the kids' parents, Brenda and Mark Miller, expecting at least a sheepish apology. Instead, she walked into an argument. "Oh, come on," Brenda scoffed, hands on her hips. "They're just kids. It's boiling hot out. What's the big deal?" Jasmine stared at her, momentarily stunned. "The big deal," she said slowly, her voice tight, "is that this is my private property, my home, my pool. And I don't recall issuing any open invitations." Mark Miller, arms crossed, muttered, "You're being dramatic." Dramatic. That was the word people loved to throw around when they weren't the ones being disrespected. Jasmine bit back the string of words she really wanted to unleash. Instead, she invested in a set of prominent security cameras, complete with warning signs. Maybe that visible deterrent would finally send a clear message. But it didn't. The problem was just getting started, and she was beginning to realize that politeness was getting her absolutely nowhere. The security cameras did offer a brief reprieve. For about 2 weeks, at first, the neighbors seemed to back off. No more unexplained wet footprints, no more carelessly discarded towels, no more uninvited swimmers enjoying her meticulously maintained water. Jasmine thought maybe, just maybe, she had finally made her point, that her desire for privacy and respect for her property was understood. But then, on a scorching Saturday afternoon, one of those days where the heat radiates off the pavement in visible waves, she pulled into her driveway and noticed something immediately unsettling. Her side gate, the one she always kept securely locked, was slightly ajar. She stiffened, a cold knot of dread forming in her stomach as she walked around to the back of the house. And there it was, her backyard, transformed into a neighborhood block party she didn't authorize. Her carefully arranged patio furniture was askew. Lounge chairs she hadn't put out were occupied by strangers. Empty beer bottles and brightly colored juice boxes littered the ground. Someone had even audaciously set up a folding table, laden with chips, dip, and various snacks. And her pool, her pristine pool, was full of people, not just kids, but grown adults too. A couple of women she vaguely recognized from down the street were wading waist-deep, chatting animatedly as if it was their own private resort. A man she'd never seen before leaned against the pool ledge, a triumphant grin on his face as he sipped a drink from one of her glasses. For a second, Jasmine thought she had lost her mind, that she'd stumbled into an alternate reality. Was this actually happening? She took a hesitant step forward, scanning the raucous crowd, and that's when she locked eyes with one of her neighbors, Denise, from 4 houses over. Denise, who had never so much as nodded a hello to Jasmine before, waved enthusiastically, as if this was some prearranged, casual get-together. "Hey, girl! Hope you don't mind," she called out, her voice overly cheerful. "It was so brutally hot today, we figured we'd all cool off." Jasmine's jaw tightened to the point of aching. Mind? Oh, she minded. More than minded. Her voice, when it finally came out, was sharp and steady. "Every single one of you needs to get out of my yard. Now." Some people froze mid-splash or mid-sentence. Others exchanged bewildered or annoyed looks, as if she were the one being unreasonable. Denise scoffed audibly. "Oh, don't be like that. It's just a pool. You weren't even home, so we thought, what's the harm?" Jasmine stepped further onto her patio, her anger a simmering volcano just beneath the surface. "It's not just a pool, Denise. It's my pool, my house, my yard. You don't live here. You don't contribute to its upkeep. You don't pay for the chemicals or the water. So get out. All of you." Someone in the back muttered under their breath. "Geez, what's her major malfunction?" That was the final straw. Jasmine stormed over to the pool equipment enclosure, wrenched open the access panel, and decisively shut off the pool filter. Then, with a flourish, she yanked the power cord to the portable speakers someone had brought, plunging the impromptu party into an awkward silence. "I am calling the authorities," she announced, her voice ringing with an authority that surprised even herself. Now, that finally got their attention. Drinks were hastily snatched up, towels were wrapped around dripping bodies, and in a matter of minutes, her yard began to empty. Denise, however, had the sheer audacity to roll her eyes dramatically on her way out. "You really don't have to be so uptight about everything," she muttered, just loud enough for Jasmine to hear. "Nobody was hurting anything." Jasmine wanted to scream, to unleash the torrent of frustration that had been building for weeks. Instead, she stood stone-faced, watching as they shuffled out like a herd of chastened but still resentful sheep. She slammed the heavy gate behind the last straggler, locked it securely, and stood there, hands planted firmly on her hips, fuming. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty: this wasn't over. They had demonstrated zero respect for her property, for her explicit wishes. And if respect wasn't going to stop them from treating her home like a public utility, then something else would have to. Jasmine had tried everything: talking, reasoning, installing cameras, reinforcing locks. None of it had made a lasting impact. So now, it was time to get undeniably creative. She sat at her kitchen table later that evening, staring blankly at the security footage from earlier that day. The sheer, unmitigated nerve of these people, the way they acted so completely entitled, as if her property was theirs to use and abuse whenever they pleased. She wasn't just angry anymore, she was done, thoroughly and completely done. and if they wanted to persist in treating her pool like the neighborhood water park, she was about to ensure their next unauthorized visit would be their absolute last. First, she made a meticulously planned trip to the industrial hardware store, not the friendly neighborhood one. She picked up 2 new, heavy-duty, marine-grade locks, one for the side gate and one for the pool equipment box. The old ones were strong, but these were advertised as virtually unbreakable. Next, she went online and ordered a special, non-toxic dye treatment for her pool. It wasn't chlorine or anything remotely harmful. It was a harmless but highly effective visual deterrent, a little something often used by public aquatic facilities to subtly expose rule breakers. A harmless chemical that turns the water a vibrant, unmistakable bright green if someone introduces certain organic compounds into it. Yep, if even one of those freeloaders dared to use her pool as a personal lavatory again, they'd leave looking like a creature from a low-budget science fiction movie. But that was just the beginning of her multi-pronged defense strategy. Jasmine wanted insurance, something that would make them think not just twice, but a dozen times, before ever contemplating stepping foot onto her property again. So, she visited a local sign fabrication shop and had a custom pool warning sign professionally made. The very next morning, she drilled it securely right onto her fence in the most visible spot imaginable, where everyone approaching her yard couldn't possibly miss it. Warning! Private pool! Chemically treated for unauthorized use. Exposure may cause severe rash, persistent itching, or temporary skin discoloration. Did it sound a little extreme? Perhaps. Was any of it actually true regarding her current pool chemistry? Nope, not a word. But they didn't know that. And just to sell the illusion with a bit more theatrical flair, she strategically placed an empty, brightly labeled hazardous chemical container near the pool pump, something she'd acquired from a friend who worked in industrial maintenance. Its ominous skull and crossbones perfectly complemented her narrative. Now, all she had to do was wait. And it didn't take long at all. The next hot afternoon, she positioned herself by her living room window, sipping iced tea, watching her little stage play unfold. It was quiet for most of the day, until she saw a couple of teenagers swaggering past her fence line. They stopped dead in their tracks to read the newly installed sign. One of them whispered something to the other, then pointed with a hesitant finger at the discarded chemical container. Within seconds, they turned right back around and scurried away in the opposite direction. Jasmine allowed herself a small, satisfied smirk. Later that evening, Brenda Miller, the same entitled neighbor from the pool party fiasco and the mother of the first trespassing teens, was walking her yappy little dog when she spotted the sign. She squinted at it, her brow furrowed. Then, she pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. Jasmine checked the neighborhood's social media group a few minutes later, and there it was, a public post from Brenda that read, FYI. Looks like Jasmine Anderson put some kind of weird, aggressive chemical in her pool. Sign says it causes rashes and skin issues. Not sure how safe that is for the environment, or if it's even legal. Just a heads up, everyone. The comments started rolling in almost immediately. OMG. What if it leaks into the groundwater? That doesn't sound legal at all. Why is she even being so possessive? It's just water, for crying out loud. Jasmine laughed out loud, a genuine, unrestrained laugh. They were mad. Not because she was potentially endangering anyone, not because they got caught red-handed, but because they realized their free ride, their unauthorized access to her amenities, was definitively over. And if they wanted to test her resolve further, they were more than welcome to try. For the first time in months, Jasmine finally felt a profound sense of peace. No more random towels appearing on her fence. No more strangers lounging in her yard as if they owned it. No more entitled attitudes directed her way. Her plan had worked. Or at least, she thought it had. But then, the knock came. It was a Thursday evening, a couple of weeks later, when she heard it, sharp, impatient banging on her front door. She set down her book and peeked through the peephole. Brenda Miller, arms crossed, face a mask of indignation. Jasmine sighed heavily. Here we go again, she murmured. She opened the door, keeping her expression carefully neutral and calm. Yes? Brenda didn't waste a single second on pleasantries. We need to talk. Jasmine raised a questioning eyebrow. Do we? Brenda huffed a dramatic sigh. Look, I don't know what your problem is, but people in the neighborhood are saying you've put some kind of dangerous, industrial chemicals in your swimming pool. Jasmine blinked slowly, then allowed a small smirk to play on her lips. I did, she said smoothly, her voice even. To keep out uninvited guests. Brenda's jaw clenched visibly. You can't just do that. What if a small child accidentally touches the water? Jasmine folded her arms calmly. A small child who has somehow managed to break into my locked and fenced yard. Brenda faltered for a moment, clearly not expecting that logical counterpoint. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. Jasmine shot back, her patience wearing thin. I told people repeatedly to stay out. They didn't listen. So, I took necessary precautions. Brenda scoffed. You're being utterly ridiculous. You don't even have kids. It's just sitting there, completely going to waste. Jasmine tilted her head slightly. So, because I don't have children of my own, that automatically means my private pool is up for public use. Is that your logic? Brenda's face began to turn a mottled shade of red. Well, if you weren't so consistently unfriendly and standoffish, maybe people around here would actually like you. Jasmine let out a laugh then, a deep, genuine laugh that seemed to surprise Brenda. That's your entire problem, Brenda. You sincerely believe that being liked means you have to let people walk all over you and disrespect your boundaries. Brenda opened her mouth, then closed it again, then shook her head in sheer frustration. You know what? Forget it. She spun on her heel and began to stomp away. Enjoy being the mean, isolated neighbor, Jasmine called after her calmly. Enjoy using your own garden hose this summer, Brenda. Brenda didn't look back. Jasmine shut the door, a wider smile now gracing her lips. They were clearly mad, but they had finally, unequivocally, gotten the message. And just to be absolutely certain, to add a final layer of deterrence, she doubled down. The very next morning, she added one final touch to her property defense system, a series of motion-activated sprinklers, strategically positioned along the inside of her fence line. If anyone even considered trying to sneak in again, they'd receive a nice, cold, shocking wake-up call. But the best part was, she never actually had to witness them in action, because nobody tried again. The freeloading days were officially over. After months of escalating frustration and blatant disrespect, Jasmine had finally reclaimed her peace and her property. The pool was hers again, pristine and undisturbed. The backyard, quiet and serene. The cloud of entitlement that had hung over her home had finally dissipated. And the best part of it all? She never even had to make that call to the police, because that was never truly her goal. She wasn't trying to cause a neighborhood war or make lasting enemies. She simply wanted what was rightfully hers to be respected. But here's the thing, some people simply do not, and will not, respect boundaries unless they are firmly and unequivocally forced to. Jasmine had tried to be nice. She had issued polite warnings. She had even asked nicely on multiple occasions. And they had ignored her wishes, ignored her rights, at every single turn. But the second she flipped the script, the second she introduced consequences, they backed off. Because at the end of the day, people will often take as much as you allow them to take. It doesn't matter if it's your time, your personal space, your emotional energy, or even your damn swimming pool. If you don't establish and enforce clear boundaries, someone will inevitably try to walk all over you. So, was Jasmine Anderson a little bit petty for what she did? Maybe by some definitions. But was she wrong? Not even a little. What about you? Have you ever had to stand your ground when people tried to take advantage of your kindness or your property? Or better yet, how would you have handled this exact situation? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more updates. Thanks for watching, and always remember, respect is earned, not freely given.